money trail is a ghost, I said. My voice a low murmur that was the only sound in the quiet, sun-drenched living room of my cabin. I pointed a finger at a specific line on the complex financial flowchart I had spread across the heavy oak table. It disappears into a series of shell corporations registered in the Cayman Islands, but the initial deposits, the seed money for the entire corrupt enterprise, all originated from a single, state-level infrastructure fund right here. Across the table, my guest, a man in a simple fishing shirt and a worn baseball cap, leaned forward, his eyes sharp and focused, missing nothing. He was a man who understood the intricate dance of shadows and secrets better than anyone I knew. So, the bribery wasn't just a cost of doing business, he said, his voice a quiet, resonant baritone. It was the foundation of the entire empire. They used public money to build a private kingdom. Exactly, I confirmed. In this ledger, I tapped a thick, leather-bound book, its pages filled with the elegant, precise handwriting of a long-dead accountant, is the key. It's the original, the one they thought was destroyed in the fire of '98. It connects every single illegal payment directly to Senator Blackwood. The guest nodded slowly, a grim, satisfied smile on his face. Eyes meeting mine. With this evidence, you have not just given us a case. You have given us the means to dismantle the most powerful political corruption ring in this state's history. It was at that exact pivotal moment, the culmination of a year of dangerous, painstaking investigative work, that the front door of my cabin was thrown open with a violent bang that made us both flinch. Framed in the doorway, her hands on her hips, her face a mask of furious, righteous indignation, was Carol, the president of the Lakefront Estates Homeowners Association. I knew it. She shrieked, her voice a piercing violation of the sacred quiet. She pointed a trembling, accusatory finger at me, then at my guest. A secret meeting, just as I suspected. You are running an illegal, unlicensed business operation from this residence in direct violation of Bylaw 73, Section C. This is a residential community, not a corporate headquarters. I am here to conduct a formal inspection and issue an immediate cease and desist order. She took a triumphant step inside, a clipboard of bylaws held before her like a holy text. She was so blinded by her own petty, a self-important crusade that she did not see the two plainclothes, armed state troopers who had been sitting discreetly on my porch, nor did she recognize the face of the man in the baseball cap she had just so rudely interrupted. She had not just stormed into a private home. No. She had just breached a secure, classified meeting and trespassed upon the one man in the state who had the power to make her entire world and her precious HOA vanish with a single phone call. The man in the fishing shirt, the one she had just accused of being part of my illegal business, was David Sterling, the sitting Attorney General of the state of New York. My name is Michael Donovan, and I am a private investigator. I am not the kind who deals with cheating spouses or insurance fraud. I am a specialist in forensic accounting and deep-cover corporate and political investigations. I am the man very powerful people hire when they need to find a truth that is buried under a mountain of money, lies, and intimidation. This cabin, a quiet, isolated property on a private non-HOA lake in the Adirondacks, was my refuge and my secure workshop. It was the place I could retreat to for months at a time to analyze evidence, to meet with confidential informants, to build the kinds of cases that could topple giants. The case I had been working on for the past year was the biggest of my career. I had been hired by a consortium of good government groups to investigate the legendary, seemingly untouchable state senator Franklin Blackwood. The investigation had led me down a dark, dangerous rabbit hole of shell corporations, laundered money, in a pattern of corruption that stretched back decades. The final piece of the puzzle, the smoking gun, was the ledger I had managed to acquire from the estate of Blackwood's deceased former accountant. Given the extreme sensitivity of the evidence and the very real danger posed by Senator Blackwood and his associates, I had requested a direct, off-the-books meeting with the one man I knew I could trust, the State Attorney General David Sterling. He was a man of unimpeachable integrity, a fearless prosecutor who had built his career on taking down corrupt politicians. We had agreed to meet here at my secure cabin, a neutral ground far from the prying eyes of the Capitol.
Oh, his two-man.
State police security detail had posted up on the porch, a discreet but necessary precaution. The only flaw in my otherwise perfect sanctuary was the recent development of the Lakefront Estates HOA on the adjacent property and its tyrannical President Carol. She was a woman obsessed with conformity and control. My quiet, intensely private, and often unoccupied cabin, with its high-tech security system and its occasional mysterious visitors, was a source of endless suspicion for her. Her campaign of harassment had been relentless. She had tried to fine me for the unapproved color of my cabin's shutters, a historically accurate forest green. She had filed a complaint with the town about my unlicensed business activities, fishing expedition that was quickly dismissed for lack of evidence. She saw my need for privacy not as a personal preference, but as a sure sign of a criminal enterprise. Her letters had become increasingly aggressive, filled with threats of surveillance and formal audits to ensure I was complying with the residential use-only covenants of her association covenants that, of course, did not apply to my legally separate property. Her crusade was a constant, the irritating distraction, a cloud of gnats buzzing around my head while I was trying to hunt a dragon. I had never imagined, however, her obsession would lead her to commit an act of such breathtaking stupidity and recklessness. Now, she stood in my living room, her face flushed with the thrill of having finally caught me in the act. She looked from me to the Attorney General, who was still sitting calmly in his chair, his expression now one of a deep, almost anthropological curiosity. "And you?" she said, pointing at him. "I don't know who you are, sir, but you are aiding and abetting this man's illegal operation. I will need your name for the official report as well." The Attorney General slowly took off his baseball cap and placed it on the table, next to the ledger that contained the evidence to bring down a sitting senator. He looked at Carol, his eyes calm and steady. "My name is David Sterling," he said, his voice quiet but resonating with an authority that seemed to make the very air in the room grow heavy. "And you, ma'am, have just made the most catastrophic mistake of your entire life?" The two state troopers on the porch, having heard the commotion, now moved silently to flank the doorway, their hands resting on their sidearms, their eyes cold and hard. Carol's triumphant expression finally began to falter, replaced by the first faint flicker of confusion and dawning fear. She was beginning to realize that she had not stormed into a simple business meeting. She had just blundered into the middle of something far more important and far more dangerous than she could possibly comprehend. The shift in the room was palpable. It was not a loud, dramatic change, but a slow, chilling transformation of the atmosphere from a petty neighborhood dispute into a high-stakes federal incident. The air itself seemed to grow thicker, heavier, charged with a new and terrifying gravity. The two state troopers, who had been a discreet, almost invisible presence on the porch, now framed the doorway, their quiet, professional menace, a stark contrast to Carol's shrill, amateurish aggression. Carol stared at the Attorney General, her mind clearly struggling to process the name Sterling. She repeated, a flicker of confused recognition in her eyes. "Like Sterling, the Attorney General, the very same," David Sterling said, his voice still unnervingly calm. He slowly stood up, a man of average height, but he now seemed to tower over her. "And we were in the middle of a confidential meeting concerning a matter of significant state security when you decided to burst in and play neighborhood cop. This cabin, at this moment, is a designated secure location for the New York State Attorney General's office. You have not just trespassed on private property, ma'am. You have illegally entered a secure state facility and have attempted to intimidate a state officer and his confidential informant." Every word was a hammer blow, dismantling her entire reality. Her face, which had been flushed with triumphant rage, was now a pasty, chalky white. The leather-bound binder of HOA rules she had been clutching slipped from her nerveless fingers and fell to the floor with a soft, pathetic thud. I didn't know," she stammered, her voice a pathetic whisper. "I thought he was running a business? The bylaws? Your bylaws?" The Attorney General replied, his voice taking on a new, icy edge of contempt. Your bylaws are a private contract for your little club. They do not supersede state and federal law. They do not give you the right to conduct illegal searches, and they most certainly do not give you the authority to interfere with a Class A felony investigation. He gestured to the papers and the ledger on the table. The work Mr. Donovan is doing, the work you have just so recklessly compromised, is part of an ongoing investigation into a level of political corruption that could destabilize our entire state government. The man he is investigating is dangerous, violent, and has a history of making witnesses disappear. Your little stunt, your theatrical home invasion, could have gotten us all killed. The color drained completely from her face. She looked as if she were about to be sick. The two state troopers now stepped fully into the room, their expressions grim. Furthermore, the Attorney General continued, his voice relentless. Mr. Donovan's privacy is not a matter of personal preference. It is a matter of state security. His identity as a confidential contractor for my office is now compromised because of your actions. The security of this entire investigation is compromised. He pulled out his own secure satellite phone and made a call. Yes, this is Sterling, he said, his voice all business. I need a full threat assessment and a security sweep of my current location. Yes, the Donovan cabin. We've had a breach. A civilian, a Ms. Carroll. He looked at her, one eyebrow raised. P. Peterson, she stammered. A Ms. Carol Peterson has illegally entered the perimeter. I want a full background check on her, her family, her financials, and any and all connections to Senator Blackwood and his associates. Now. He hung up and looked at her, his eyes cold as a winter sky. Congratulations, Ms. Peterson. You are now a person of interest in a federal racketeering investigation. Your life is about to be put under a microscope, so powerful it can see your very soul. You wanted to know what business was being conducted in this cabin. Well, now you are a part of that business. It was at that moment that the local sheriff's deputy, the one she had likely called herself to report my illegal business, finally arrived. He was a young officer, and he pulled up to the cabin to find a scene that no amount of academy training could have prepared him for. Two state police troopers holding a weeping woman on the porch, and the state attorney general himself standing. In the living room, the deputy's eyes went wide as he recognized the most powerful law enforcement officer in the state. He could only stammer, "Mr. Attorney General, sir." His voice ringing with authority. This woman, he gestured to a now sobbing Carol, has committed a series of crimes here today, including breaking and entering and obstruction of justice. I want her taken into custody. My office will be in touch with your district attorney to coordinate the charges. I want this entire area sealed off. No one comes up this road without my personal authorization. The deputy, looking utterly terrified, could only nod and comply. The sight of Carol Peterson, the imperious queen of the lakefront estates, being read her rights and placed in the back of a local patrol car, was a moment of profound, almost poetic justice. Her petty, self-important world had collided with the real world of consequence, and she had been utterly annihilated. The aftermath was swift and total. The news of the incident, and of the reason for the Attorney General's secret meeting at my cabin, was leaked to the press. A leak, I suspect, was strategically orchestrated by Sterling's office. The story of the HOA president, who had accidentally stormed a top-secret meeting and interfered with the investigation of the state's most corrupt politician, became a national sensation. A cautionary tale of HOA overreach and karmic retribution. Blackwood, his name now publicly linked to the investigation, was politically and legally ruined. He was forced to resign, and the evidence from the ledger led to a series of federal indictments that dismantled his entire criminal enterprise. The Lakefront Estates, HOA, facing a massive lawsuit from me for harassment and a federal investigation into their president, imploded. The residents, horrified to learn that their leader's petty crusade had nearly derailed a major corruption case and had brought the full weight of the federal government down upon their community, immediately voted to dissolve the board and completely rewrite their bylaws. A few weeks later, I was sitting on my porch with David Sterling. The state troopers were gone, but a new, more advanced security system had been installed at the state's expense. The silence had returned to my woods, a deep and welcome peace. "Well, Michael," he said with a wry smile, sipping a glass of iced tea. I have to admit, that was the most interesting confidential informant meeting of my career. "I'm just glad we were able to finish our work," I replied. "We did more than that," he said, his expression growing serious. Because of the public attention Ms. Peterson brought to the case, 2 more witnesses came forward against Blackwood. Her foolishness didn't just lead to her own downfall, it made our case against him airtight. In a strange way, she helped us serve justice. I looked out at the lake, its surface calm and clear. My quiet, secluded cabin was no longer a secret, but it was finally secure. The petty tyrant who had tried to police my life had been undone, not by an argument or a fight, but by her own blind arrogance. She had kicked in the door to a quiet cabin, expecting to find a small-time rule-breaker. Instead, she had found the full, unyielding weight of the state, and it had crushed her.